Hey guys, this time we're going to do Luma, track mats, and masks. What are the purpose of those? Masks, track mats, and Luma mats. So let's get into it. I'm going to create a new composition. Same thing as before, 30, big duration. I'm going to change my background to black. Hit OK. And I'm going to name it appropriately for this week. Copy my name from there. Put in my folders. If I can spell. Footage. Supporting comps. Alphabetize it or do it by tag. Alphabetize if it. Here's a little trick. If you like your stuff alphabetized but it's still not up at the top, you can select your guy here and put a little underscore and it'll put it on top. Just take the underscore out whenever you're going to output a movie or anything like that. I'm going to save it. Got a file out here. I'm going to call it lesson. So I got my folders, they're empty, nothing's in there. Empty timeline. I'm going to bring in something for a background. I'm going to import, bring in this image called woodblock, zoom out a little bit. It's a little bit big, so I'm going to snap it to the width using our transform fit comp to width, and it'll shrink it down for us perfectly. It's called woodblock. I'm going to call it BG for background. It's the kind of background I'm going to work with this time. And bring in another image. It's going to be called, let me see, cheese Swiss. Now before I do anything with that guy, I'm going to make a new solid. I'm going to say call it mask demo. If you can think of, we kind of got ahead of ourselves and learned what masks are. Masks go on a layer, such as this solid layer. And of course you draw them like so. We kind of probably experts in masks. And right now they're on add. If I select them all and go to subtract, it's one way to look at this solid. And another way to look at it is if it was a piece of cheese, Swiss cheese, just like this guy. So one way to remember masks is that if you draw a mask on a layer and you move that layer, the mask is going with it. It is connected because one, it's an attribute of this layer. So wherever this layer goes, that's where these guys are going to go because they're attached to it. And that is one way to remember how a mask works. This is very similar to cheese. So we could delete this guy. I'm going to set it up a little differently. And one thing to think about too is just get used to working with images in your sequence, in your composition down here, and visually. If it really does bug you, you can turn it off. But just get used to having images back there for your background. So I'm going to make another solid, or bring my solid back in. I'm going to call this utility. And then down here, call it cheese holes. So then we can do it all over again. This time I'm not going to move my layer at all. Just keep them different. So I've got cheese holes, but right now I need to invert these guys. They're on add, I'm going to subtract them. And remember, we have the wood block in there. So we do have holes in this solid layer because I've subtracted the shapes out of that layer. We're kind of working inversely from what we've done before. I'm going to go to fit. And that's masks on a layer. And there's this little option on these layers. If you don't see this guy, or if you accidentally hide these, which you can do by accident, or you do it on purpose so you have more room, within this little gray area you could right click and you see columns, and this is where you can get a whole bunch of options in there. But the go-to things are switches and modes and parent. So switches are these things. We'll get into them. Modes are here, and there's like where your layer modes are, and this little thing called track mat. This is what you need to find whenever you're doing track mats. And you have different options. You have two options. Basically, you have alpha and Luma, and within those two options you have an alpha mat and then one that's inverted alpha mat. Same thing with Luma, and you have an inverted Luma. So we'll do an alpha mat first. So if I want to bring my cheese down in this layer, and I can turn off this background. So we have cheese up here. I want to fill up the frame. If I zoom out a little bit, you could do this, tug on the corner, hold down shift, and try to eyeball it. But again, we got a quick little shortcut. Right click, transform, fit to width. You could fit to height. Let's just see what that looks like. Not what we want. Transform, fit to width. And be careful with the fit to comp. It's not what we want either, because it squishes our image. We don't want that. I'm going to Control Z. Hit reset just to get back to where we were. Select my layer, right click, transform, fit to width, save. Okay, so a track mat, how it works. You can put what you want to be shown on the bottom and what you want to use as a cookie cutter to cut out on top. So you can select this layer, go a little drop down, and you see the option. And it only has this option, cheese holes, which is cheese holes. So if you accidentally have a background above this layer, you can't jump and select the one above it. It works as a little system together. So you got to be careful that make sure both are on before you do this. You can't move them after you do it. But you click this little drop down and do alpha track mat or alpha mat, and it has a little icon. Make sure you got the same one selected that you want, and it's considered a track mat, but it's got alpha and Luma to it. And from here, these are two different layers. This is what's more similar to alt clicking between layers in Photoshop. But you can select this cheese layer, and it is independent from the layer above it. Ideally, you'd want to select both and move them at once. But right now I'm going to adjust my holes. I'll come down here and change my color so I can see them better. Make it an obnoxious red. And since they're all selected, if I double clicked, everything is selected. Don't want that. I want to select just one. Double click, pick a spot. Mask 2, double click, pick a spot. Mask 3, double click, and I want to pick this spot. And it looks like cheese. Now this system, let me show you how this works. You can get into some trouble with it. I want to save. You get in trouble when you try to move these guys around. If you just move it not really what you want. If you select one of them, move it, it's not really what you want. You need to move both at once. But if you're going to do that, you might as well pre-compose it. But before I do that, while I have multiple layers, I want to show you how these things can mess up. So when you do this function, when you click down and hit alpha matte, if you look up here, it turns off this layer, the top layer above it. So if you want to go and turn on a bunch of layers and you turn this on, just be mindful that if you have a track matte on a layer, it should be off to work properly. And what I do is I put a little name on it, because I know that if I have these names, kind of like a tag, hashtag, or whatever you want to remember it, I do track matte similar to this little name up here. So I know that if that's a track matte, you have to turn it off. And you can pick a color to make sure that it's like whatever you're doing for track mattes, you can do that kind of thing too. But if I know I see track matte on there, whatever I turn on or off, I need to make sure this guy's off, and that is with the cheese Swiss. And here's another thing that you can do too, is go in here, cheese Swiss, and I like the word holes on it, so cheese Swiss holes track matte. So I look down here and I see cheese Swiss and I see cheese Swiss, so I know they're together, and I need to be careful because there's probably an alpha matte. Now if I drag this guy up above, which will mess up this little effect, there's no longer a track matte, and it's still there. It's still trying to look for a layer above it, so you got to be careful with that. If I drag it back down, you see that's there again. So you got to be careful. If you want to like change your mind and do something else, drag it up, you need to turn that track matte off, but it's still trying to be activated. So I'm going to try to drag this guy up on top, and see track matte is still there. Now it's going to try to look for the background, and it's messing up your guy because that's not what we intended from the beginning. And notice it turned it off. So you got to be careful with that guy. See, it's not there, so you need to drag it down to see what the hell's going on. You can always go back the way you were, turn on everything, and do what you intended from the beginning all over again, which is use this guy and cut out my Swiss cheese. If it helps, like here's my cheese Swiss layer right here, and then I have holes I want to poke in it, which is on this layer. And you can select this guy, put the holes you want to poke on top, the texture and picture on the bottom. Go to your track matte and do alpha matte, and that gives us holes. And we're going to use this more and more for animations. Right now we're not animating anything, but we will be animating with this kind of technique. And since this is a very delicate ecosystem with these two guys, and you don't want to mess it up, you want to quote-unquote protect it. You want to pre-comp it. So you can select this, pre-compose it, and call it cheese. Of course I need an E in there. Swiss. So let's look up here. Close up some of these guys. This is what I'm working in, cheese Swiss. And you drag it to supporting comps. So now that I've pre-composed it, and notice that it is in full frame, I can then scale it down and arrange it on our wood block. I want to go to scale and adjust it. Now if you want to adjust different things, again you select your pre-comp, cheese Swiss, double click it, and here's what we were working with. It's in full frame, everything is as high res as possible, it's looking good, and that's why we pre-compose it, because then we can come in and scale it down. You wouldn't want to scale it down and then pre-compose. Keep it as big quality as you can. 1920 1080 bit quality. I can close that guy, save. So it looks like I have a piece of cheese on here. And it looks like it could use a shadow. Go right click, effect, perspective, drop shadow. So it's pretty small shadow. Let's do a color, see what the hell's going on. Turn up the opacity, distance. So I'm like at 15, so I'll do 15. Softness. Looking at it, looks like it's okay. Change it back to black. Take all the color out. I don't want any color. Bottom left corner. And then I can turn down the opacity probably 25 to 30%. I would say 30. So now there's a little drop shadow. Very similar to Photoshop, except we can always go back and change. So we got cheese Swiss. You could duplicate this guy. I'm going to select it and make it not so perfect. Whoa. Just in case I don't want to mess up my background, I can select my background and lock it, and then go to my cheese Swiss, and you can mouse over it and see it kind of select around the edge, and then you can select the guy and then move it. Now we have some cheese. But we had a single layer that we used the mask tool on, and then we had an independent layer of the cheese, and we used both of those to cut out the holes, and that was the track matte. So if you have an image with the alpha channel, you would want to use the track matte alpha matte for an image that already has an alpha channel, which we made our alpha channel using our solid and masks. But if you already had an image with alpha channel, like a TIFF or a PNG, you would use an alpha matte for that, because it has an alpha channel to that image. If you don't have an alpha matte and you only had a black and white image, computer programs like to take in black and white information and use it. And that's what is used with the Luma matte. So let's come over here, go to our project, go to our footage, and I'm going to bring in some images, and then we'll talk about what they are. Cracker images. We double click this guy and you can see the footage. It is not in the composition. It is we're just looking at this footage. That's why it's labeled footage up here. I did this in Illustrator. It's like the outline of a cracker, and I also have a texture that I made to look like a cracker, and we're going to cut out this texture with this black and white image using the Luma matte. Alright, so this is our cheese. I'm going to go back to this composition, and if it freaks you out to have stuff in it, you can turn it off and lock them down so they're not touched, or you can work with everything visible. So where's our texture? I'm going to drag my texture down in here, and the texture is over everything. And then I got my black and white. I'm going to put it on top. And this is the two that I'm going to be messing with. So I want to make it red. I'm going to turn these to a different color so we can look at these two. So cracker texture, cracker shape, because I did do that in Illustrator, just a shape. If you buy stock footage, most of the time they'll have like, say for instance, an explosion, or probably an explosion, that kind of thing. You will have the video of the explosion, and then they'll also give you a black and white of the same thing. It looks like a silhouette inverted, and you would use this method to cut it out, because you can't really use a pen tool or anything like that to go select around the fire itself. And you would use levels or different kind of techniques to crank up, make it black and white, crank up the values to bring all the shadows back to white, and try to get a good black and white image, and you can cut things out with it. So just like this guy, well, look, we have our cheese texture on this example on the bottom, and what we want to cut out with that image on top. So we got to look over here. We have our texture on the bottom, and our cookie cutter, what we want to use to cut out, up on top. So we can select this guy, and notice the eyeball is going to turn off when we do this. Go to this little track matte drop down, and we do Luma, because it's using the luminosity of this guy. Now I'm going to turn off the background. So with that texture, we do have this black and white. And if we do move the black and white image around, you'll notice that the texture crawls. So these are independent of each other. But you got to be careful. I'm going to right click, transform, fit to comp, make it go back to the center. I'm going to save this guy, and now we got this kind of cutout using just black and white information, no alpha channel at all. So if we do the alpha channel, it's a solid color, there's no holes in this guy. But using the black and white imagery, it could be used to cut it out. So that's pretty powerful, and it's kind of weird at first, but you just got to get used to it. There's ways to cut things out with the alpha channel or without an alpha channel, just using black and white information. And of course we want to protect this guy, so I'm going to pre-compose it. Call this cracker. And we're going to test the alpha channel, and it is there, because just to clarify, I'm clicking the alpha channel, this is a solid image. We come down here, this is with the actual effect on. If I turn it off, here we have this image, this texture going, corner to corner. But if we turn on this effect, it's saying use the black and white information, everything black, make it transparent, everything white, make it opaque. And you could do an invert for some weird reason if you'd like to do that. But we got Luma matte here. I'm going to save it. I'm going to close it out. I'm going to turn it back on here. I'm going to turn on everything now. But notice it's looking a little flat, a little dimensional, one-dimensional. I'm going to scale this guy down. So now we got some cheese and crackers. So I'm getting it to the scale that I want first. So I'm close to 40. I'm going to hit 40. And now we can put some layer styles on this guy. And here we put an effect of a drop down shadow. Layer style, since we're going to be putting some other layer styles on this guy, we're going to do that all with layer styles instead of just an effect. And layer styles, we're going to not confuse anybody on this guy. So I'm going to right click the cracker layer, go to layer styles, and I need to pick something, but I need to look at what I want to do. Now I built this cracker from an example picture here, so I'm going to drag it in here. Now let's see a good picture. So what I'm looking at is the holes. So around the holes there's like a lighter brown, almost white, and that's what I want to add for this guy. So I'm going to leave this to the side so we can look at it. Get a little bit of everything. 1, 2, 3. 3 different examples. What I'm going to do, and I can actually move this guy over temporarily. Get some of this. Okay, so here's my cracker. Now I'm seeing some lightness around the holes, but I'm looking, first things first, I want to add an edge going into the cracker first, because these edges are a little light. So I think if I do an effect that goes around the whole thing and goes inward, and I can put this kind of like brown toasted color, especially right here, you can see it. See how this little edge is all brown and it goes in, all like it's all inside. It's not a glow, it's actually like an inner, I think I can use an inner glow, because it would be a glow, but it's all inside, and I can adjust the fall off to make it look like a toasted edge, because that's what this guy needs. He's a little bare. So I can do layer style, inner glow, and it's default to white. I'm going to double click this guy. I'm going to go to an obnoxious red so we can see what's going on. I've got a blend mode on it. I want to turn it off. Here we go. So let's take a look over here. This is pretty close to what we want. I'll probably fade it a little bit more with the size. So it's at 5. Let me go to 10. It's looking pretty good. And now, since we have a good look, it's all around the edge, we can change the color. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking the little eyedropper, and I need to pick a nice toasty color for the toasty edge. And this little light color or the dark color. I like this darker brown. He could even go darker. Now I'm looking in the center too, that's looking pretty good. But the edges are looking muddy. There's too much gray. So you can come in here and pull some of the black, the gray out, go to the, or some of the white out, go to the black, pull some of the black. But then it becomes too saturated. You can pull some white in there. And pull in some red. So now our edges are toasted. The circles here, I'd like some more color, so maybe turn up our size. We can go 25. Those inner circles are looking pretty good. Now one more thing. Inner glow is, it tries to do it all inside. There's no one direction. There's no like light source. And I was thinking about it. So if I select this guy and right click this, go to layer styles, shadows, the whole point about a shadow is there's a direction of light. So if I want to put a light source in here, I could actually use a shadow for a light source. So I'm using these guys totally opposite. And that's the beautiful thing about art. So inner shadow. Drop shadow is like outside the perimeter of the object. This is inside the object only. So that's what I want. And let's see. So I'm going to eventually, see how it's a dark color? I'm going to change it to a light color. So I'm using my shadow as a light. Come over here. Make it a light color. There's a mode on it, so it's kind of hard to see. So there's our light color. And now we can adjust it. I think we might want to make it, whoa, there's our distance. So that's how distance works. It just kind of offsets it. It's not what I want. I wanted its size. So you can increase the size of your blur to almost nothing. Something happened. 1.5, enter. Then you can adjust your distance to offset it just a smidge. And that gives us that nice little pillow look from a cracker. You can turn it up all the way and you can pull it back down. You can turn it up and then actually pick a color. And now that we have a white, yellow, we can adjust that to make it brighter. It still has yellow in it. And that looks pretty darn good. It did kind of take away our crispy edge up on the top left, but that's just how the nature of that effect works. It assumes there's a shadow and it cuts off that effect, but we still have the toastedness on the bottom. So I'm going to turn off my reference and look at my cracker. That looks pretty delicious. And that's it. It's a layer style. So if we had a different type of cracker that looked similar, we could do a shape, and you can copy and paste those layer styles here onto this new shape. So I'm going to save this guy, duplicate him, move it. Kind of helps if it's replicating something real to kind of make it not perfect. No perfect angles, just kind of adjust it by hand. Nothing's perfect. And it kind of looks like a background to like a cooking show. Cheese and crackers. And man, that cracker looks pretty darn good. I'm impressed with it. And I'm looking at my bin. I need to organize my bin a little bit. So cheese Swiss, we got crackers. You know, once you build this stuff, you can keep a library of it and always go back. I don't know how many times you need crackers and cheese, but you have them already pre-built and ready to go. And I see one more thing I could do. I can bring in a solid over the background. I'm going to go to Effect, Generate, Circle. I'm going to make a vignette. I'm going to increase this guy so it's just the edges. I'm going to invert it. I'm going to change it to black. I'm going to feather it. Probably like 250. And call it vignette down here. Go to my opacity and probably down to 15. Very subtle. Maybe 25. And put the vignette on top in case something goes underneath it. Like if if I move a cracker, the cracker is affected, and you can put a multiply on it, and it will react with the colors of the whatever you have underneath it. But when you get comfortable with working with things on the background, you start to just work within a single composition while making other compositions and continually working. And if things get a little crazy for you, you can lock them off so you don't mess with anything. You can turn it off. And you can select, since they're all locked, you can select all these layers and turn them all off. So whatever you have selected will turn on or off, or whatever you're clicking. You can solo them all. You can lock them all down. But you have to go in and unlock manually. So if you wanted, you could skip some. Make sure whatever you're, like one of them that's selected, you can turn off the eyeball and it will turn off everything, or isolate those, that kind of thing. And I see I have my reference in there. I'm going to get rid of that guy. And everything's nice and neat. That's pretty much it for that, for the masks, track mats, and Luma mats. I was going to show you how I made this cracker. It's very similar to that fire effect. So let me come over here. A little bonus lesson. I'm going to call this Cracker How To. So I got a nice clean comp. I'm going to leave this guy in supporting comps. I need a solid. Alright. So I'm going to bring in my example. Again, I'm going to put it on top. I'm going to move it over. Fit. Okay, I was looking at this guy, and it looks like a noise, kind of like the fire and clouds that I did before. So not looking at the shape, just looking at this texture of the cookie, it looks like a noise. Maybe the detail within the noise is blurred, and the colors, I think I could use that same effect, Colorama, to do the colors. So if I select my guy, I'm going to move my reference over, and I'll look at this cookie and, you know, check it out. Cracker, not a cookie. Select my utility. I'm going to right click, go to Effect, go to Noise, Turbulent Noise. Alright, so we got this started. Looking at this cookie, it looks like if I drew a square around where I think some of this could work, would be like about right here. So this texture is too big. I would need to scale it up to kind of fit what I'm thinking how this could work. So if you remember, go down to Transform, in the Effect, go to my Scale. So if it's about here, I need to increase it by double. And I'm thinking, I'm just looking at this, the light to dark splotches. So light to dark, and thinking of a cookie being this big. I think this is a good starting point. So we'll just leave it there for now on the scale. And looking at the detail, there's not much detail in here. It's as if it was blurred. So I remember I'm going to toggle down the transform. There's complexity, but subsettings. I remember messing with this guy. So I'm going to go down 10, so 45. Too detailed. Don't want that. I'm going to go up. So I'm going to go to 60. Somehow that looks like it's working. I want to change this one to 80, just see where it goes. Too detailed. Go to 65. Okay, I think that's the direction I want to go. Softens up those details, but there's like some little detail in there that could work. Before I go any further, I'm going to minimize it and put a color to it. So I'm saving this guy. I think I'm far enough with this little tweak that I could start putting the shape in, or the color, and then adjusting it from there. So I'm going to toggle this guy down. I'm going to need another plugin. Make sure my layer's selected. Here's my effect here. I'm going to right click, go to Effect, Color Correction, Colorama. This guy. It's crazy. Input phase, don't mess with it. Output cycle, this is what we're looking for. I was going through here and looking at these guys. You could pick one and try to make it work. I stumbled upon RGB, red, green, and blue, and I think 3 colors is enough because I see like a white, a middle, and a dark. And when you select these little triangles, you double click it and you get this other window. I wish we would have the other window because I'm more comfortable in it, and this is like an older style window, but oh well. So a brown, I need to get a brown, so I'm going to click somewhere in here, kind of in a brown, and I'm looking at this color. This is the color that it's going to end up, and I'm looking at these values here. So it's a little orange. I need a little more brown, so a little yellow, a little more yellow. Come up here. I think that's a good starting color, so I'm going to hit OK. And I think this should be the darkest one because I don't see anything here. We could move it over. I'm moving this down, seeing where it updates here. So I'm going to go back where it was. So we got a blue and a green right now. So we can pick one. The blue can be the dark, or the blue can be the light. There's less dark than there is light on the cookie. So here it's kind of equal. But I want to pick the blue to be the darker color. And we can do a trick. We can look at this guy, red, green, and blue. You can type in these numbers somewhere, such as like a number, notepad. So I want to say 249, 192, 60. I'm going to hit cancel, come over to the blue, double click, 249, 192, 60. So now we have the same color that we had before, but we need to make it darker. So we just come down, and this is where it's a little tricky. You gotta eyeball it if you want to change the color a little bit. I want to change it just a little bit. I'm dragging down, hitting OK. It's pretty close to that color. Now the green is throwing us off. This needs to be that same color but almost white. 249, 192, 60. Let me double check. 192.60, and then make it close to white. So we have two colors that are really close. This one we can move around and see how it's pulling. So the closer I pull this guy, you can see it start to really kind of be psychedelic. We don't want to go psychedelic. But I like how these little hot spots, I like to do it extreme to see where it is. And that could be like the burnt-ish toasted patches of this cookie, cracker, whatever. And we can pull this guy around and see what he does. I don't want to keep it where it was. And I'll adjust this guy, see where he's going. I want to keep it where it was. So you just kind of look at it by eye. I think this is too white, so we can bring it in a little bit and just take a look at it. I think that's okay. Be nice to bring in some browns, but I'm okay with that right now. Okay, so we got our reference here. We got our, what is this? Cracker texture. And we can start looking at it through the black and white. So I'm going to drag this guy down. Select my texture. Come to Luma Matte and cut it out. And I can turn on my example again. Control Z if you accidentally drag something. Select my reference, drag it over, and I can take a look. And this is how I built my cracker texture. It's a little yellow to my taste, but that's pretty much how I did it. And if you wanted to, since we have a cracker to begin with, I'm going to come up here and call it underscore version 01, so we keep track. And I'm going to, it's called cracker how to. It's already made. I'm going to minimize so I can see what I'm doing. Come down here. This is basically a cracker version 02. Double click, and of course I'm in it, so it won't do anything. So cracker version 02. I'm going to drag version 02 out here. Should be big. It's okay. I can scale it down to the exact same size as this guy by looking at it. Go to 40. And now we have a different look on this cracker. Save it. And this is what I'm saying. If I want to take these layer effects, these layer styles, and get them over to here, I could recreate it by right clicking layer styles, looking at what I did, go through and punch in the numbers. But very similar to Photoshop, I can just select all layer styles, copy it, go to my cracker version 2 and paste it, and it will just come over. And that's our other cracker. So it's pretty cool to use After Effects, very similar to Photoshop, using the effects and textures, the colorama to bring out textures using black and white information, very similar to the Luma track mats, things like that. But that's it for this time. We're very close to doing backgrounds for titles of a TV show. So you can do whatever you want. But that's it for this time. See you later.